This is a quick and dirty teardown of the AAWireless Android Auto dongle. This was one of the first Android Auto dongles that came out from a developer and team who are known for offering good Android Auto implementations, including previously an app so you could have an old Android phone sit in your car and act as a dongle, called, I think, Head Unit Reloaded or something. The AAWireless is a standalone dongle on a little PCB with an ARM processor, something similar to a Raspberry Pi. So I thought I'd crack mine open because it was having maybe some overheating issues, and I'm going to put a heatsink on top of the SoC. While I'm here, here's a teardown. So it's a pretty small PCB, as you can see. Pretty simple. At the center, we have the SoC, this Rockchip RK3308. It's got 4 ARM A35 CPUs. That is a ARM v8 32-bit thing. It's pretty advanced. Their datasheet talks a lot about HDMI video out at 1080p. It can support voice wake and a lot of voice processing. Like it's made for a higher-end smart speaker, that kind of stuff. But here, obviously, it's handling the Android Auto stuff, running a custom stripped-down version of Linux, I believe. Wireless is this little Broadcom AP6256. This goes up to Wi-Fi AC, also does Bluetooth, I'm sure. And that one's, of course, on its own separate board, as these things often are. Not a ton of antenna I'm seeing here. I am not as experienced with PCB analysis and design. I see some thick traces out here, so maybe they have a really tiny antenna. Maybe they're using the ground plane as an antenna, because I know that can be a thing. Not quite certain. I'll stop speculating. The other chips, we've got this 4C FEMDR008G. This is 8 gigabytes or 64 gigabits of eMMC. It calls itself, I think, industrial eMMC or something like that. It's supposed to be higher end. Does, smart reporting, wear leveling, ECC, all that stuff. It actually does also support firmware updates. So I wonder if the devs of this board will bother updating the firmware of the eMMC and otherwise keeping its longevity as high as possible and having it warn you when it reaches the end of its lifespan. Not that you should be doing very much writing to this, since it's mostly just a passive kind of IoT device that only gets occasional firmware updates to patch bugs. This is actually pretty good with firmware updates and compensating for weirdness of other cars, especially VW group cars have a lot of issues. I know Hyundai Kia Genesis, which is I drive a Genesis, has some weirdness as well, etc. Over here we have UniIC SCB, that is 15H2G 160. It's 2 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM, pretty simple. The final IC is the most interesting. So Nuvotron, let's get that in focus. N76E003A T120, or T20. This is a lighter microcontroller with an Intel 8051, I think it is, instruction set back from, 70s, 80s. So it's very interesting that that was the choice of this microcontroller manufacturer. On this board, I'm sure it's just kind of handling lower level stuff, kind of probably doing, handling reset commands, maybe helping bootstrap and do boot, managing the board, that kind of stuff. It's relatively lightweight, obviously not as fancy, no BGA stuff needed for this, just a bunch of pins it can use to talk to whatever you want. So it's probably just coordinating the board and handling crashes, and who knows. There's some test pins. On the other side of the board, you've got your usual debug connections. Nothing else too notable. The boards worked well, except for this possible overheating. So again, heatsink and maybe some small holes carved in the casing. Construction of the casing is pretty nice and simple. This PCB clicks over these 4 posts, like that. They seem to use a bit of glue material on each of them, so it stays anchored. Then it just clicks over this case, and it's held in with a tab on each of the 4 corners. So if you want to disassemble it, you take your pointy pry tool, since it can cut into your hand if it's just a piece of metal. I have wrapped mine like a prison shiv, I guess. You can then point it into one of the sides, click it open, and then just make your way around. Maybe keep some guitar picks around to help make it easier to continue the removal. But on the whole, it's pretty simple. Interesting still to see what they chose, and I will stop blathering and end the teardown. Thank you.